right, we are live-ish. Today we have a super special treat. Via the Lift Lab audience, we are bringing you the Code Man. And he is the man responsible for the thousands of Warrior Wednesday blog posts that we've put up. He, unfortunately, is a graduate of Indiana University, also known as the Pitchfork School, or the little brother to the best university in Indiana. And we have Cody on the show today. What we're going to talk about is basically change psychology, how your mind works, and how it affects your ability to achieve your goals. We're going to bring back some of the philosophical aspects of training that may or may not have been lost in the Instagram world we live in. And in general, we're going to talk about the concept of reverse engineering. For those of you that aren't familiar with the term reverse engineering, it's basically just that. You're going to deconstruct things and figure out what went wrong and kind of what plays a role in the success or the lack of success of individuals in different pursuits. So, Cody, let's start right there. Well, let's not start right there. People probably also want to know how the hell you ended up here.
Yep.
It would be a reasonable thought. I tend to skip over these things because I know how you ended up here.
Yeah. How did an IU grad end up in the midst of a bunch of Boilermakers?
Exactly. So give the audience, just a few 2-minute background on the Code Man.
Yeah, so I, for some reason, always knew I wanted to go to IU all through high school. So I really only applied to IU, immediately got accepted. So I knew sports was not my thing, trying to play D1 in the Big Ten. So I gave that dream up pretty quickly. So when I went to IU, I wanted to be in physical therapy. I used physical therapy in the past, like in high school, and after one semester of being like exercise science and shadowing physical therapists, I was like, I don't want to do rehab, I want to do performance, so I want to make people faster, stronger, bigger, all that stuff, as opposed to just kind of walking. So I started in the performance realm, and then I make decisions on a whim. So it wasn't until literally last semester of senior year of college, I decided hey, grad school might be kind of cool. So I ended up back at IU for my master's. And so through my master's, it was pretty cool. So this is where I really got a good taste of strength and conditioning. So through my master's program, I was able to be an assistant strength and conditioning coach for basically all athletic teams at IU. And then kind of halfway through that, I wanted to do more research and teaching. So then I started to look into that more in depth. So then I ended up being the only one in my program, which was applied sports science, to start working in the research labs, doing a master's thesis. And then after I graduated, so I kind of had the best of both worlds with performance on one side, research and teaching on the other. And then shortly later, you guys gave me a call.
And let's back up a little bit. Take us to the application process to IU. Now, I don't know if this is true, but I heard it's one question, and you come in, it's a live interview, and they put a mirror right under your nose. If it fogs up, you're in. That's no math required.
It wasn't that hard to get into for senior year of high school. It was. I don't know if it had to do with my grades.
Don't insult our audience. Yeah. They know it wasn't hard to get into.
I was like, oh, okay, I'm immediately accepted.
Let's not try to explain this too much. We know.
Let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, today we're talking about reverse engineering, essentially, a healthy lifestyle. Okay, so just the narrative now is there's more and more of a message of just eat less, move more, and you'll reduce fatness and sickness. And we haven't seen that happen at all.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little idea of what it looks like when people try to reverse engineer health and fitness and why it doesn't work?
Yeah, so a lot of times I see it when people are basically the main one is overweight people that haven't worked out in years, that are still living in their high school glory days. So let's say you have a 40-year-old male that comes in and he went from lifting all the time, so 5 days a week, all throughout college, and then gets a job and hasn't worked out and hasn't watched his diet for 15 years. Now all of a sudden he thinks jumping immediately back into doing what he was doing when he was 20 years old is going to help. And that's not always the case. So they're like, well, if I go back to eating the same stuff, having the same type of workout regimen as I was 20, I'll look like I did when I was 20, and that always isn't the case.
Just ignoring all the other factors.
Yeah, ignoring it took me 15 years to gain all this weight and to be this out of shape. I can go back to a 5-day a week, eat what I want because I'm working out all the time, and that just isn't the case.
And I'll just assume that I have the hormone profile of a...
I'll just assume that my testosterone is going like this because I'm in my peak.
So essentially, that was the solution to the problem 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now there's a kind of new problem. So the old solution is applied to the new problem.
Yeah.
And we think we're just going to solve it.
Exactly. So prime example, throughout my freshman year of college, I pretty much lived off of beef jerky, oatmeal, and Monster energy drinks.
Well, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, right? I mean, come on.
Of course you lived off of
those
that.
2 weeks of finals, that's all I had. It was awesome. And I mean, I was playing basketball all the time, lifting all the time, studying all the time. And I can tell you that if I tried to do that for 5 hours this time, being 10 years older, it just would not work. It'd just be terrible.
So everybody seems to think that you can just with weight loss or fat loss, you can just work backwards, right? So meaning, all right, you're 55 years old, you've never exercised. We know that eating more sugary, high fat, high calorie foods and moving less is a recipe, for weight loss. And so then the reverse engineered solution to that is, okay, well, we'll just take away the sugary fat foods and get you to move more.
Mm-hmm.
Why now? There's a plausible reason where I could see where that would be a good solution.
Mm-hmm.
But why doesn't that work?
So a lot of times giving somebody all of the information at once and giving them, say, 10 things to do at one time, giving them the perfect program isn't always going to work long term because it's not sustainable. So again, if you go back to that guy that's 15 years out of the exercise game and hasn't watched his diet or whatever, and all of a sudden he tries to do everything at once, yes, that might work for a week, but as we see all the time, they tend to burn out really quickly. And again, it's kind of taking an old solution to a new problem and then trying to go back and fix that problem.
So if that approach doesn't work, you've written a lot about habit layering and things of that nature. And so for the audience that doesn't know, Cody works primarily with our private clientele and our general fitness, group fitness class clientele. So what are some of the solutions that you're using with them to have them be successful? Because we've had a lot of success.
Yeah, so I like to take, and again, I use this analogy in a class I was teaching one time down at IU, is I told the people hey, if I want directions to, let's say, Lift Lab, right? And I whip out my phone. Obviously I need to know, number one, where Lift Lab is, but then the most important thing I need to know is where am I coming from? So if I'm going from my house to Lift Lab, I have to know where my house is, right? So I can't just blindly say, oh, do these 5 things, it'll help you lose weight or help you reach your goals. I have to know where your starting point is. So if I don't know where you're starting from, I can't give you directions to Lift Lab, because if you're in Greenwood, it's going to be completely different to where if you're in Brownsburg. So I have to know where you're starting from. So there's always has to be a conversation, and it takes work on their part too. Before I try to give any dietary advice or exercise advice or whatever it may be, it's work on their part. It's okay, take a week. Don't try to change anything because I'm going to look at it. Write down, number one, every single thing that you ate. Number 2, write down like a planned activity. And then from a starting point, now we can start to go forward.
So essentially, you're trying to calibrate them to a little healthier, a little better.
Yeah.
A
So
little better start.
yeah. So for instance, if I tell one person, hey, cut out your, cut out drinking sugary drinks. Let's just start there. Yes, that might work for that person. But if I tell that to the same guy that only has water and milk all the time, that's not going to do anything.
Bad advice.
Whoa. Yeah.
Oh, check.
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
that.
Well, I'm already there. So now what? Oh, I should probably see what you're currently doing.
So that idea of habit layering, you obviously, one of the things that basically sealed your fate working here was your reading list was extremely similar to mine.
That's weird. Yeah.
We have read a lot of the same books, and the person that recommended you here basically said, I think you guys
Which
like
I
the same
still
shit.
don't. I'm still.
You'll
I
never
don't know who it is.
It's gonna be.
All of a sudden,
It's gonna be
I
a
was
mystery,
like,
man.
I told my wife, I was like, hey, I heard somebody somewhere mentioning a Lift Lab. I've heard of them before. I'm gonna Google who they are. Started reading some stuff, and literally 24 hours later, I got a creepy DM from Dan German, hey,
Going down
I
in
mean,
the deep.
and I was just like, who is telling this information?
Leaks.
Yeah.
WikiLeaks. Snowden.
The
Conspiracies.
it's probably 7% of my job. Just slide into the DM.
So it's still when people are like, "Oh, how'd you find out about Lift Lab?" I'm still like, I have no idea how they heard of me.
Covert ops.
Yeah.
Dan German just slid into my DMs.
So, all right. That sounded weird.
Yeah.
Sounds slimy.
And one of the books that we had in common was a book, Mark Devine's book.
Yep.
He wrote it, and it was the way of the seal.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main concepts that I liked in the book, and you share this as well, is the idea of front sight focus.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote a blog that was centered around this as an idea and how you can apply it to your daily life and your pursuit of fitness. Mark Devine, obviously, he was a Navy SEAL, some sort of leadership role. I don't remember his exact leadership role, but he was using these skills within the SEAL teams.
Mm-hmm.
We are not Navy SEALs. We are not claiming that we didn't go to BUDS or Hell. We didn't even fill out the application.
No.
Very far removed from it, but we like the principles and how it applies to just achieving goals. Do you think you could let the lovely people at home know how you've worked, or first of all, what the idea of front sight focus is and kind of how you've worked that into the training?
Yeah. So again, that's probably the number one takeaway from his book. There's a lot of good information in there, but that's something that I wanted to talk about on the blog post, was because you could easily apply that, number one, to training, and then number two, to business or social life. So kind of the concept is focusing, just taking a few minutes every day. It doesn't have to be the same time every day. It can be for consistency purposes, but taking a few minutes every day and seeing, writing down either a long-term goal or a short-term goal that'll kind of help you. And I think that's what I talked about in the blog post. So for instance, let's say my long-term goal was to lose 50 pounds. So every day I would just kind of focus on that and say, okay, the reason I'm going to the gym today is because in 6 months I want to lose 50 pounds, or by the end of the year I want to lose 50 pounds. Now, so that would be my long-term goal. Then my short-term, front sight focus for today, which we recently had those Win Today t-shirts. And I really like that because it kind of goes back to that as well, where a daily front sight focus. So for instance, I want to lose 50 pounds. Okay, that's my long-term goal. My short-term goal today would be, okay, what can I do today to help that long-term goal? So it might be, well, I could go to the gym today, or I could go grocery shopping and have healthier meal choices and meal prep, something like that. So you can look at it, front sight focus for a long-term, macro cycle goal, and then kind of reverse engineer, break that down into what can I do today to help me get there.
Sure. And when we're talking about like these small incremental changes for long-term goals, we're really getting at the idea of, the psychology of change, right? Because when you set out to lose 50 pounds, like this can be a seemingly daunting task.
Yeah.
And inevitably, no matter how dedicated you are, there are slip-ups along the way.
Oh, yeah.
And we've tried to convey this message to our people that have fat loss goals, to our weightlifters, to our athletes, that there are going to be moments when you fail. And you wrote 2 pieces, I think, that deal with this idea that there's going to be setbacks and failures. One of them was centered around the AMRAP mentality, and the other one was centered around always moving forward, and kind of how you can turn defeat into success. Sponge on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll start with the moving forward piece that I wrote, and kind of going back and re-listening to that interview. That was an interview from an Army Ranger, by the way. So we're still kind of sticking. For some reason, I'm always like fall into military podcasts. I'm not a military guy, but I'm always kind of.
It's just the mindset.
Yeah, it's the
like
mindset, right? So it's
the
like
discipline.
It's a very objective, mindset.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I'm drawn to them is because, or like that type of podcast, is because all the military people or like books that we read, once they get out of the military, a lot of times they're really successful in the business world or in, let's just say, the fitness world or the podcasting world or whatever you want to choose. So it's like, hey, these guys are doing something right because they're applying something in the military to civilian life. So the move forward aspect really had to deal with adaptability, and I'll give you kind of the example that that guy gave. So like during battle, if you are, let's just say, on a patrol and all of a sudden you get ambushed, obviously you're not expecting that, or you don't know when that's coming or where that's coming. So it's always about just breaking down something into simple steps and what can we do right now to help us move forward and get out of this situation. So if things go sideways, I could tell my troops, hey, defend that wall, or hey, let's take this next room to take the house. Eventually we'll take the block, something like that. So like in training, a lot of times, especially with competitive athletes that are in here all the time, they're always dealing with some type of, or at least somebody is dealing with some type of nagging injury, or maybe they're coming off of something to where they're coming off of a weight loss thing, so then I got to ramp back up. So for instance, if somebody comes in and is in a sling, instead of me saying, oh, well, today I had you doing bench press, hey, let's just work on some front squats. Or like, I think when we were talking, we used your example with tearing that pec. It's like, you immediately texted Dan German, hey, time to get my aerobic capacity up. Like, put me on the assault bike, let's run, let's do something else. And that's kind of what it has to do with. It's like, yes, I didn't plan to have a torn pec for 6 months. Sure. What can I do to stay fit or to work on something that I might have not planned for? So that's kind of what that has to do with.
And the idea of, I always sum this up to my kids when they're, whining and bitching about what they don't have and what they can't do and all this. And the idea is that you need to focus on what you do have and what you can do, not what you don't have and you can't do, right? The idea that we're always going to be progressing. And there was I don't remember if it was in the book Lone Survivor or the movie Lone Survivor. The bad thing is about the amount of books and documentaries that I consume is I'm not as sharp as I once was.
It all blends together.
But there's a point. So for the CrossFitters listening to this, you love your Memorial Day Murph. Murph is the guy that basically was. I don't want to use the word. He was like the leader of the group that unfortunately they all ended up getting killed in Afghanistan when they were on a recon mission. But Marcus Luttrell was the lone survivor, and they're basically up on this mountainside, and they are getting attacked by the Taliban, and there is nowhere to go. There is nowhere to move forward to. It's like the edge of a cliff, and he basically says, Marcus Luttrell asks the guy, what's the next plan of action? And he was like, down the hill. And they roll down the hill, and like damn near kills them. They get down there, they fight a little more. What next? And they just keep rolling down the hill.
Yeah.
And he did that until he was, unfortunately, the last one alive and until he was in a river basin, right? And I think if we're sticking with the military theme, this is maybe less accurate information, but the 13 hours, the Benghazi story, was something very similar where their resources were extremely limited.
And that's
the manpower was extremely limited.
The guy that was doing the podcast, that was based off of his mission.
Yeah.
So he was in Benghazi doing that. So yeah.
Yeah, so they were. Which, by the way, if you watch the movie Jim from The Office,
Yep.
like who would have thought he could pull off?
And Roy's in there.
That's a good point. Who would have thought they could pull off?
Yeah, they went from Dunder Mifflin to Benghazi apparently.
Jeez.
Bringing this back to some like the real life stuff, right? So we talk about military, and we talk about having a goal of let's say you do get attacked, like the end goal to survive, right? Or the end goal to take whatever it might be so big, right? Like if you're trying to take the fortress per se, right? Sometimes that goal is so huge that it can be paralyzing, and that's a pretty easy example to set out of you're either going to live or you die. So sometimes you might be paralyzed by the task you have to take on. Right, so this idea of let's go and break it down to one little thing at a time, and we can take the mission objective. It's the same thing with losing that 50 pounds, wouldn't you say? Where you have a goal that might you might be afraid of that goal, but if you set it up to where you're going to do it over 6 months, and day one you're just going to make a small step, then the fear of that goal, the fear of actually meeting that goal, kind of subsides a little bit. Because you have an actual step to work on day number one. Sometimes if that goal is too big, or if you fear it being too big, then you might run from it, right? And then you end up putting on 50 pounds, which is extremely paralyzing.
Yeah.
So, it's a huge thought process change as you go to that goal.
And working on how we're looking at achieving these goals, and this goes along with we keep drawing these military conclusions, so let's roll with it. But we now have a unique scenario where the marketplace is providing wearables for nearly everything. So about 2 months ago, I read the Stephen Coulter book, Stealing Fire, and he was talking about flow state and optimization of your mindset and learning. And somebody was actually doing research where they could put more or less what looked like headphones on you and zap your neurons into compliance to learning. And I was like,
wow,
damn. And this week I saw 2 product launches on Facebook advertisement for a product that does those things. So we have this uniqueness where we have more wearables and more technology at our exposure than ever. We have more science, more research, more data, yet we're not any closer to solving the problem on obesity and sickness. And my thought has been, one, we need to reconstruct all the guidelines for physical activity.
Yeah.
Okay. 2, need to bring the philosophical aspects of training back into training. All right. And what I mean is, with the apps and the wearables, there's now a servitude towards those apps and wearables. And oftentimes, the apps and the wearables are generated off of old constructs of what the health and fitness aspects or health and fitness recommendations should be. So, for example, we've long lived under the guidelines if you need to exercise for 30 minutes a day at a moderate heart rate. Okay, that moderate heart rate is determined by this 220 minus your age. Multiply that by 27 and voila. And while this is a general guideline for the general population, if you were looking at looking at it objectively, it does not give you good data or valid data. Especially if you worked in a lab, and you can put, if you put an 80-year-old guy, that's been working out his entire life, and he can get his heart rate up to 160 or 170, he has far surpassed what a maximal heart rate should be, right? And so there has to be, with the servitude towards apps, we've lost some of the intuition that occurs in training, okay? And now to tie this back in with the military, they'll tell you that you can lay out a great plan, but as soon as you start your mission, it changes rapidly. And this is common with even the military people that we work with. So the idea is that you adapt on what you feel is the right move for the right time.
Yeah.
Of course, those guys are going to communicate to each other, but they're not going to be like, oh, wait, hold on, GPS is calculating, okay, I can move to that house. Over there, right? No, they're just going to react, okay, and get where they need to be. But somewhere along the line, we seem to have lost like the philosophical aspects of training. Like where are people enjoying the process? Where are they making changes intuitively versus, some sort of servitude towards the app, whether it's MyFitnessPal, Whoop, HRV.
Yeah, and
we've used them all.
Yeah, and all those things are great from like a coach's aspect. So, for instance, at IU, we did like the HRV for a bunch of our athletes, and we would never, unless it was an issue, show the athletes what their HRV was. It was basically just like for the coaches only, just so we can have some data for it. And we were kind of doing a little bit of research, but it kind of goes back to what DD was talking about, being paralyzed or getting too much information. I think that's happening now because with all those apps, it's kind of bringing it to the everyday Joe who, let's face it, can basically just do anything that's better than being a couch potato, but yet he's drowning in all of this data that he really doesn't need quite just yet.
And let's talk about I would like to point out that heart rate, the 220 minus your age, you know who came up with that?
I can't remember.
Let me just take a moment to tell you that basically every Boilermaker that contributed something of global significance I remember to the greatest detail. However, that came from IU. It came from an Olympic swimmer, I believe. He was an IU grad. He was also an exercise physiologist there, and he was basically plucking some numbers out of the air, trying to figure out like a reasonable range. So we have him to thank for that. But
we're gonna fact check that.
Yeah. You just get on your Google. And IU dude.
I'm gonna use this technology.
I can intuitively tell you I'm right. Code man, we have the daily recommendation of 30 minutes a day, 7 days a week. Okay, and to me, this is woefully lacking.
Yeah.
Mainly because like industrial jobs, hard labor jobs, things that just kept you moving in general are far and few between as we move towards the robot.
Yeah.
Right. The machines. Side note: did you guys see where I think it was Facebook created like some bots and gave them like I don't even know how you describe it, the accelerated learning, where they can they can work together to learn new skills. And they had them communicating in English. The bots developed their own language.
Oh boy!
And they pulled the plug on that shit. So might want to put a
that's
and Elon Musk, who, if you're in technology, is somebody you should be paying attention to, was like, we need to stop fucking around with AI. We're going to get ourselves killed.
It needs to be like an off switch somewhere.
If you haven't seen Terminator 2, pause.
That's the problem. Like
Terminator 2.
Everyone nowadays that's too young to remember Terminator is creating all this AI.
Right.
They need to go back.
Right. Like we've seen this in the movie. Right? Remember Star Trek predicted cell phones. Terminator 2 is Okay, anyway. But okay, the exercise recommendations. We don't have jobs that require too much moving around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my thought on it is 30 minutes a day, 7 days a week is not going to make you healthy.
No.
This is like the false reverse engineering of the process.
Yeah.
I think if you trained an hour a day, let's say 6 days a week, that would probably be suffice so long as your training was supporting a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like we talk about, and this might be a little off topic, but we've talked about transfer of training. So, for instance, if we're doing like snatch high pulls, hey, let's go right into a snatch because that's what we're eventually trying to get better at. So, and I was thinking about this when we were talking before we aired is the people that I find to be successful are using what they do in Lift Lab to support something else outside of just right before this podcast. I was training Matt Troyer, and for those of you that don't know what he's involved with, he does tennis, he skis, He does. He surfs. He does everything. He runs. He cycles. So he's using Lift Lab to
Owns like 200 businesses.
Yeah, owns owns an awesome brewery. But and I was like, hey, like, what's kind of your favorite sport? And he was like, not really. I just kind of play everything. And it's just like
that is an active lifestyle.
Yeah, like those are the successful people that are using training in order to be better or just sustain something that they enjoy outside of planned Lift Lab activity.
Absolutely, and even if it's to the with technology, we should have more time.
Yeah.
To pursue leisure because you can operate and do things faster. Well, what happens is just like any other app, we develop the same servitude towards the phone, and like this, there's research to show this temporary hit in dopamine when somebody likes or comments on their post, okay, which is insane. So you think about like us being malleable and adaptable beings, that's pretty wild. But it pales in comparison to the dopamine you get from walking outside for 15 minutes, right?
Be outside, be in nature, do something.
I think the idea of kind of looking up is a good idea, looking up and around.
The cervical walking motion.
Not on Monday or whatever it was.
Right.
You're saying you're burning your eyes out,
right?
You know, the total eclipse. But you could look up through your phone and see it, which is kind of odd. But anyway, kind of looking up and around and just kind of noticing your surroundings is a huge aspect.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. But I think that as you know, we have two of us here at this table have kids. We start thinking about raising the children, and we want them. It's ironic. Like if you look at the U.S. culture, right? We want our kids to have these great starts to life, these great futures, and you know we'll do everything for them, right? We'll get them as many sports as activities as we can. We'll pay for them to do this. We'll do everything we can for them, except for be a good example.
Yeah.
Right? Like you could spend less money on their activities and just spend more time on
go camping for the weekend.
Yeah, or just make like, hey, you know, when my kids just ask to ride bikes like all the damn time. Let's go ride bikes. Let's go ride bikes. And just being in a level of physical conditioning where you can say yes every single time.
Yeah.
Too tired. I get too much. I'd love to go, but I'm going to scroll Facebook and see what other people are doing in their lives that may be fun, right? And just there's an overall loss of engagement in the process. Even for these things like, to a large degree, this is why I like our older clients. Maybe I'll say more than our millennials, is because when you go and do things with them, they're not putting it on Instagram.
Yeah.
Right now, the overwhelming majority of the stuff that the time that Dan Brown spends on social media is promoting Lift Lab, right? So we're putting our stuff in the feed for everybody to consume like others, which is fine. You could also consume social media once a day and get just as much out of it versus checking it, 35 times an hour.
Constantly.
But I appreciate those who are still, and like a lot of our masters and older clients, the Matt Troyers of the world, that are just out there wakeboarding, snowboarding, skiing, and not taking a single. Like, you ever notice that when you text with somebody that's older, they don't respond?
Yeah. Or they don't send like okay text. They're just like, yeah, I got it. Why do you?
right. Like, okay, I'll read this message and then nothing because they're
getting back to doing cool shit.
Exactly. I'll get back to building my business, to having fun, to enjoying my family, and those sort of things.
Yeah.
It's also there's also the bigger symptom of feeling that, we have the mentality and the mindset that we want you to train, for the things you're going to do in your life, right? Like I used to use the hashtag all the time, relentlessly, and get made fun of it, get made fun of for it, but the why we train.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're training to do other shit, not to train. There's a small slice of the pie that do fitness for this sport of competitive fitness, but the overwhelming 99% of the people just need to train to have a better quality.
And those are the clients that are the easiest clients to train, and you don't have to worry about them, missing training sessions or missing a week here or there. It's because they realize the value that planned training has for their life.
Absolutely.
So, if you're the guy that the only activity you're getting is in a weight, and it doesn't have to be here at Lift Lab, but if the only activity you're getting is in a weight room and you're taking a kid to soccer practice and scrolling your phone for an hour while he's running around, and
Right.
you're not, jogging around the track or something, you're most likely going to just kind of quit the gym or basically do something else that's not physically active.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, Cody, I'll ask you this just to kind of wrap us up here. But bring us home with the commonalities of our clients that are successful.
Yeah, so and again, it goes back to, the most successful clients, just kind of in my opinion, are the ones that see the value of training for their lifestyle. So and I know it's kind of cliche, like fitness is a lifestyle, but it really is. And that's what I would try to teach to obviously our clients here, but then also students at IU. It's like, hey, here's your homework. Go play a pickup game of whatever over the weekend. I don't care if it's basketball. I don't care if it's squash or soccer or whatever. Just go have fun. Take a break from being in your room studying or playing Call of Duty. Just go play. Go be active. And it's like, for the competitive athletes, like they don't have an issue with that because they're in here all the time. But for people that are here just to move around and get a good workout, that's completely fine. But it's like, hey, go do something else. That's why I always ask people, it's like, hey, what'd you do over the weekend? Or hey, you got any plans tonight? Or are you playing tennis later? Or something like that. It's like if they can find something to do that they enjoy, they are easily gonna be more committed than the person that is doing this solely just to kind of check it off the box.
100%. Amen. All right, Code Man, thank you. Thank you for introducing yourself to the Lift Lab
Yeah.
out there in the digital space audience. Appreciate having you on. Dan German, as always, thank you. Brian, you did a great job today. We're out.